Welcome to District Deep Dive, where I, a walking encyclopedia of Hunger Games knowledge, deep dive the entire Hunger Games series. Today, I'll be covering chapters 19 through 22 in The Hunger Games. I know last week I said I was going to be covering chapters 19 through 23, but I ran out of time. Before we begin, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe because it really does help with the algorithm. After the heartbreak that was last week's episode with Rue's death, this week is going to be more on the lighter side, as much as it can be in The Hunger Games, because we're covering more of Katniss and Peeta's relationship in this set of chapters. Like always, this episode does contain spoilers for Sunrise on the Reaping. This is your one and only warning. To start off the episode, I'm going to do a recap of the chapters I'll be covering. Part 3, The Victor. Chapter 19. Clasping her hands over her mouth after shouting Peeta's name, Katniss freezes, waiting for other tributes to appear. Luckily, no one does. Now that it's been announced that 2 tributes can win if they're from the same district, Katniss realizes that Peeta must have been playing the star-crossed lovers angle this entire time. She smiles, knowing now that Peeta was never a danger to her. Although she wishes she could go looking for Peeta immediately, she makes herself sleep and starts to look for him the next morning, being extra conscientious of the careers. Knowing Peeta has to have had access to water, Katniss begins to search along the stream, until she hears a voice say, "You here to finish me off, sweetheart?" Peeta has camouflaged himself with mud and leaves along the bank. Katniss slowly and painfully manages to get Peeta out of his hiding spot and to the edge of the stream. Peeta is in rough shape and burning with fever, but he still manages to hold on to his sense of humor. She starts to clean him off and fix the smaller injuries before tackling the severe wound on his leg brought on by Cato. Katniss gathers her courage to look at the wound on his leg, doing what she can to help as she unsuccessfully tries to hide how much she hates seeing wounds. By late afternoon, Katniss helps Peeta to a cave to hide out. Knowing how severe his injuries are, Peeta begins to try to tell Katniss something about if he doesn't make it back. But Katniss, already scared he's going to die, doesn't want to hear him talk like that. So to stop him, she kisses him. Telling him she forbids him to die, Katniss steps outside the cave as a parachute lands. Inside of it is a pot of broth. Katniss understands this as a message from Haymitch. 1 kiss equals 1 pot of broth. If she wants to keep Peeta alive, she's going to have to up the romance to give the audience something to care about. As she returns inside the cave to show Peeta what Haymitch has sent, she thinks how great Peeta is at pretending. Chapter 20. After hours of coaxing the pot of broth into Peeta, she lets him sleep as she attends to herself. After climbing into the overly hot sleeping bag with him, Katniss worries about what to do about his fever. By morning, though, Peeta's fever is broken. She manages to get him to eat a bit more before he insists that she now sleep and he take watch. When she wakes up that afternoon, she notices how hot Peeta's cheeks are again. When she unwraps his leg to check his wound, she sees red streaks starting to crawl up his leg. Blood poisoning. Without medicine from the capital, it will kill him, though she doesn't tell him this. But Peeta tells her that he knows what blood poisoning is, even if his mother isn't a healer. Katniss responds that he's just going to have to outlast the others, and the capital will heal him when they win. Peeta agrees for her sake. After Katniss makes Peeta more soup, he asks her to tell him a happy story. Katniss, omitting some of the less than legal details, tells Peeta about the time she got Prim's goat. On a Friday afternoon, the day before Prim's 10th birthday, Katniss and Gale had managed to bring down a buck in the woods, which resulted in both of them getting more money than they had ever held at once. On Prim's birthday, while looking at materials for a new dress for Prim, Katniss spotted an injured goat laying in the goatman's cart. Katniss had told Gale that she wants that goat for Prim. The goatman told the 2 of them that the butcher already had a deal to take her. When said butcher, Ruba, arrived and saw Katniss was eyeing the goat, she told the goatman to sell it to Katniss if she was stupid enough to take her and that their deal was off. Then she shot a wink at Katniss. After finally agreeing on the price and buying a ribbon for her, Katniss and Gale brought the goat home. When Prim saw her, she started laughing and crying all at once. Astrid and Prim then went to work on healing her, and that night, Prim insisted on sleeping by the fire with Lady, her new goat. After finishing her story, she realizes Peeta's fever has gone up. That's when the trumpets sound, signaling an announcement. This time, Claudius Templesmith is announcing a feast that has items that each of the tributes need desperately. Knowing this means his medicine, Peeta tells Katniss that she isn't risking her life for him, and the 2 argue back and forth. Katniss telling him that she's going, and Peeta threatening to drag himself after her and calling her name so other tributes find him. At a stalemate, Katniss pretends to reluctantly agree, but snaps that he has to do what she tells him, which Peeta agrees to. Later, when Katniss is washing up at the stream, another parachute lands. This one containing a tiny vial of sleep syrup, enough to knock Peeta out for a day and give her time to get to the feast and back. She mixes it up with some berries and mint leaves to hide the familiar taste, and feeds it to Peeta. At the last spoonful, Peeta realizes why the berries taste so familiar and sweet and tries to spit it out, but it's too late and he loses consciousness. Chapter 21. Katniss uses the last remaining hours before dark to camouflage the cave and prepare to go to the feast in the morning. As she sits guard overnight, she thinks about her friends and family back in District 12. A few hours before dawn, she makes her final preparations and heads to Rue's hiding place by the lake in the cornucopia, the location of the feast. As the sun rises, the ground opens up and reveals a table containing 4 backpacks, each one marked with their district numbers. Foxface sprints out of the cornucopia where she had been hiding, grabs her marked bag, and runs away. Katniss, irritated that she didn't come up with the strategy herself, realizes she has to go next. District 12's pack is so small, anyone that beats her there could easily steal it. Katniss sprints to the table, Clove emerging to throw a knife at her, which she deflects. Katniss attempts to shoot her, but Clove manages to turn just in time where it hits her left arm instead of her heart. As Katniss grabs the pack and turns to fire at her again, a knife slices across her forehead. Clove then slams into her and pins her to the ground. Clove begins to taunt Katniss about Peeta, and Katniss bluffs that Peeta's out there hunting Cato right now. As she screams for Peeta, Clove punches her in the throat and quickly looks side to side. Realizing she's lying, Clove begins to taunt her once more, this time about Rue. This enrages Katniss, and she commits to staring her down as Clove cuts her up, as her last act of defiance. Just as Clove begins to carve into her face, she's lifted off the ground. Confused, Katniss pushes herself up onto her arms and sees that Thresh is dangling Clove a foot off the ground. He heard what she said about Rue. As Thresh angrily asks what she did to that little girl, Clove screams for Cato when she sees a large rock in his hand. But Cato is too far away to stop Thresh from bringing down the rock onto Clove's temple, hard enough to dent her skull. As Clove lay there dying on the ground, Thresh turns to Katniss, asking her what she meant about Rue being her ally. Overwhelmed at the thought of Rue, the dying girl beside her, and the fear of Thresh, Katniss explains that they teamed up and she sang to Rue as she died, burying her in wildflowers, and that his district sent her bread. She then asks Thresh to kill her quickly, but Thresh lowers the rock and lets her go. Just this once. For Rue. Now they're even. As Cato makes his way closer, Thresh tells her that she'd better run, and Katniss does just that. After a few minutes, Clove's cannon sounds. As she runs, Katniss tries to stop the blood from pouring from her wound with Rue's socks she had been using for gloves, but they become soaked in minutes. She makes it to the cave, though, and opens the backpack, which contains one hypodermic needle. Plunging it into Peeta's arms, she administers the life-saving medicine before she loses consciousness. Chapter 22. The next day, Katniss slowly awakens to find Peeta, who had awoken the previous evening to find her in a very scary pool of blood. Peeta, who is much better after the medication, tells Katniss to let him take care of her for a while. The game makers have brought on a storm as she lay unconscious, and Peeta wonders who the target is. Katniss tells him it's for Cato and Thresh, and explains to him what happened at the feast, which leads to her telling him about everything that happened with Rue. When Peeta is in disbelief that Thresh let Katniss go because he didn't want to owe her anything, Katniss tells him that she wouldn't expect him to get it because he isn't from the scene, and how it's just like her never getting over owing him for the bread. Peeta tells her that he thinks they can let that go now since they were kids and she just essentially brought him back from the dead. Katniss finally asks him why he did it, why he gave her that bread. Peeta tells her you know why, when she shakes her head, says that Haymitch said she would take a lot of convincing. He then changes the subject to Cato and Thresh. Katniss gets upset at the thought of Thresh dying, but knowing that she can't say that out loud, covers with the fact that she just wants to go home. Peeta kisses her and tells her to go to sleep and dream of home and they'll be there in no time. When Peeta wakes Katniss again, the rain has turned into a downpour and the two eat the remaining food they have left and discuss where Thresh went. Peeta wonders what the two of them have to do to get Haymitch to send them some food. Katniss, remembering that he didn't get the message of one kiss equals one pot of broth, tries to subtly get the romance back on track. As she does so, though, she realizes how much she does not want to lose Peeta, and it's not because of the audience, it's because he's him. But Katniss, not wanting to voice her true feelings, lies and says that Haymitch told her to steer clear of that topic, which Peeta catches on to. He then leans in and kisses her, and this time, the both of them are fully aware of what's happening. This is the first kiss for Katniss that makes her want another one. But her head wound starts to bleed again, and Peeta makes her lay down. The next day, there's still no break in the storm, keeping them trapped in their cave, unable to hunt for food. Knowing Haymitch is their only hope of getting some, Katniss tries to ramp up the romance again by asking Peeta when his crush started. Peeta then tells her that it was on the first day of school, when his father pointed her out and told her that he wanted to marry her mother, but that she had run off with the coal miner because when he sang, even the birds stopped to listen. In music assembly that day, the teacher had asked who knew the Valley song, and Katniss's hands shot straight up. When she sang in front of the whole class, Peeta swore that all the birds outside stopped to listen, and after that, he was a goner, just like her mother. He says since he hadn't worked up the nerve to talk to her in the last 11 years, his name being drawn at the reaping was a real piece of luck. For a moment, Katniss is foolishly happy, but then gets confused, because they're supposed to be pretending to be in love, not actually being in love. Katniss then starts to question if Peeta's feelings are real. Wanting to shut out the rest of the world, but knowing she can't for sponsor's sake, she tells Peeta he doesn't have any competition anywhere. Just then, a silver parachute lands outside. Haymitch has sent them a feast of food. Peeta quips that Haymitch must have finally got tired of watching them starve. Katniss agrees, but inwardly, she hears Haymitch's voice telling her, yes, that's what I'm looking for, sweetheart. Now on to some world building topics, which I'm going to be building on previous world building topics here in this first one, which is about the 74th arena. The day that Katniss goes to track down Peeta, the temperature in the arena is getting hotter, but she says that the water in the stream that she walks through is cool and pleasant. Katniss says that the game makers are progressively making it hotter during the day and sending the temperatures plummeting at night. The night before the feast, Katniss says that it's so cold, so bitterly cold tonight, as if the game makers have sent an infusion of frozen air across the arena, which may be exactly what they've done. And then after the feast, the game makers send in a multi-day thunderstorm. The stream leads from the camp that Katniss and Rue made all the way to the lake and beyond. It curves to the left when Katniss gets to the spot where she left Rue to go to the careers camp, and into a part of the woods that Katniss hasn't been to at the start of this set of chapters. Quote, muddy banks covered in tangled water plants lead to large rocks that increase in size until I begin to feel somewhat trapped. And some of the rocks form cave-like structures at the part of the stream that Katniss finds Peeta at. The cave that Katniss and Peeta stay in is about 70 yards downstream from where Peeta had camouflaged himself. Finally, I'm going to cover the part of the arena that was just unknown up to this point. It's where Thresh has been hiding out, and Peeta says that as far as you can see, it's full of grasses as high as my shoulders. I don't know, maybe some of them are grain. There are patches of different colors too, but there are no paths. So that's just a little update about what the arena looks like. Onto the feast. A feast is a special event during the Hunger Games that the game makers can enact. Quote, the game makers will invite the players to a banquet, somewhere known to all like the cornucopia, as an inducement to gather and fight. Sometimes there is a feast, and sometimes there's nothing but a loaf of stale bread for the tributes to compete for. And Katniss says that feast always result in fatalities. In this year's game, though, the feast has items that each of the tributes desperately need. At dawn, there will be backpacks marked with their district number containing what that item is. This is what it looks like in the 74th arena. The ground before the mouth of the horn splits into two, and a round table with snowy white cloth rises into the arena. On the table sits 4 backpacks, 2 large black ones with the numbers 2 and 11, a medium-sized green one with the number 5, and a tiny orange one. Really, I could carry it around my wrist. That must be marked with a 12. Back in the districts during the games, specifically in District 12, with it being so late in the games and with this big event coming up, which is the feast, Katniss says that school's probably canceled. As for her family, she says that my family can either watch on the static-filled old clunker of a television at home or join the crowds in the square to watch on the big, clear screens. They'll have privacy at home, but support in the square. People will give them a kind word, a bit of food if they can spare it. And lastly, for the world building topics, I'm going to cover sleep syrup. Sleep syrup is a common medicine in District 12 and is pretty cheap as far as medicine goes. And it does just what the name suggests, it helps you sleep. It smells sickly sweet and it tastes like syrup. Katniss says that because it's so cheap, almost everyone in District 12 has had it at one point or another. She also mentions that it can be addictive. Astrid keeps a bottle of this stuff on hand to help with, quote, hysterical patients to knock them out, to stitch up a bad wound, or quiet their minds, or just help someone in pain get through the night. And it only takes just a little bit to knock you out. The vial that Haymitch sends Katniss is little, and it's enough to knock Peeta out for a day. I am going to quickly cover 2 characters. They're more minor characters, but we are introduced to them here. We have Ruba, who is District 12's resident butcher. She is described as a short, chunky woman. Katniss says that you do not haggle with Ruba. She will give you a fair price, and you can either take it or leave it. And like I mentioned in the recap, Ruba had initially made a deal with the goat man to buy the goat off of him, but when she saw that Katniss was interested in her, Ruba told the goat man that lady is in worse shape than what he said, so their deal is off, and when she walked off, she winked at Katniss. The goat man, Katniss of course does not know his real name, but she says that everyone calls him the goat man. He is an old man who keeps a small herd of goats on the other side of the seam. His joints are, quote, swollen and twisted in painful angles, and he's got a hacking cough that proves he spent years in the mines. Katniss says that he is filthy and impatient, but his goats are clean and they have rich milk if you can afford to buy it. Another quick world building section, because now we're onto the deep dive section of the episode. This is where I go over foreshadowing, parallel, symbolism, and everything in between in this section. Most of this is going to be about Katniss and Peeta because it's such a heavy Everlark set of chapters. But I'm going to start with Katniss first. Like I mentioned in the recap, Peeta said that the first day of school, the birds stopped to listen to her sing. And this happens throughout the series. The birds, the mockingjays, are listening to her and repeating her song when her and Rue have their signal. And then, of course, at Rue's death, the mockingjays pick up the lullaby that she sings to Rue, and it kind of just is haunting, echoing around her. When she's looking for Peeta, she kind of whisper shouts after he says, "You here to finish me off, sweetheart?" Because she's like, where is he? And then a mockingjay lands near her and starts to pick up her tone of her going, "Peeta, Peeta." And so she's like, well, now I gotta stop because they're mimicking me. And she was trying to be quiet about it. A couple extra details about Katniss's character. She says that stew is one of her better dishes because it mainly just involves throwing everything into a pot, and that she isn't much of a cook, so it's easier. I had mentioned before that Katniss doesn't really sing anymore after her father's death, and she kind of finds it useless, quote unquote. I think I mentioned it last episode. And so she mentions this here, that I'm not much for storytelling. It's kind of like singing, but once in a while, Prim wheedles one out of me. I talked about her like utilitarian way of thinking on certain things, what she finds. If this is not for survival, then I'm not going to focus on it, which I've talked about before, and I'll touch on a little more in a little bit. Katniss does not have the greatest relationship with her mom because of what happened after her father's death, because her mom mentally abandoned them and Katniss had to keep them alive and take over at age 11. I mean, they almost starved to death. If it hadn't been for Peeta throwing her the bread, they would have. Katniss is still 16. She's still a kid. And she hasn't had comfort really from her mother since she was 11. And she still, no matter how much she doesn't want to admit it, she still craves that. After she passes out, when she's slowly coming back into consciousness, she thinks she's back home sick. She says, "My mother's hand strokes my cheek, and I don't push it away as I would in wakefulness, never wanting her to know how much I crave that gentle touch, how much I miss her, even though I still don't trust her." Next, Katniss has a habit of deflecting, which I've kind of talked about in other episodes. I just talked about this, but I wanted to put it under deflecting because this was kind of what she was doing when she's talking about music, was deflecting by thinking, oh, it's not useful for survival. But in reality, it's because it reminded her of her father. She actually realizes it here. "It strikes me that my own reluctance to sing, my own dismissal of music, might not really be that I think it's a waste of time. It might be because it reminds me too much of my father." After she tells Peeta the story about getting Lady for prom, she tells him that, oh yeah, I knew that goat would be a little gold mine, because that's totally the reason she got Lady for her. She knew that she would make money from her. Peeta, not believing her bullshit, says, "Yes, of course I was referring to that, not the lasting joy you gave the sister you love so much you took her place in the reaping." I've talked about it back in episode 2, I think, of Katniss not being able to act, and this continues throughout the series. And there's a moment in here where Peeta calls her out for being a bad liar. There's gonna be a lot of quotes in this one because I left out a lot of this in the movie, and I want to quote it because I love everything in this set of chapters because they're both funny and they cut out a lot of that stuff. And Peeta is such a smart ass. Peeta calls her out on it because she's tried to lie, not really in a malicious way, but like, oh yeah, your leg's looking better, it's not looking worse. But it is, because she sees he has blood poisoning. So Peeta is kind of mocking her and calling her out on it. "You're such a bad liar, Katniss. I don't know how you survived this long." He begins to mimic me. "I knew that goat would be a little gold mine. You're a little cooler, though. Of course I'm not going." He shakes his head. "Never gamble at cards. You'll lose your last coin." Katniss being a bad liar, well, she can lie a little bit, like when she was fibbing, like, oh, these are sugar berries. They're totally not berries mixed in with sleep syrup. Like, she does get one over on him on that. But most times she cannot lie believably. On to more dark topics for right now. I'm going to add on to talking about Katniss and killing quickly. When she's telling Peeta the story about how she got Prim's goat, and they had shot a buck the day before, and that's how they got all that money to get the goat, she says, "Momentarily, I felt a pang at killing something so fresh and innocent, and then my stomach rumbled at the thought of all that fresh and innocent meat." So that's, again, just adding to the fact that she doesn't kill for sport, she kills for survival. And just like her thinking she was at home with her mother after she passes out, there's moments throughout the set of chapters that Katniss shows that no matter how brave she is, no matter how strong she is still scared underneath all that, and she's still a child. Like her getting upset at the feast. She's getting overwhelmed by, there's a girl dying beside her. She thinks Thresh is about to kill her in the same way. She's thinking about Rue, and she gets overwhelmed at that. She doesn't want to kill anyone else. She doesn't want anyone else to die. But because she's in the game, she can't say that. So this is when she gets upset when they're in the cave talking, and she thinks, I don't want Cato to kill Thresh at all. I don't want anyone else to die. But this is absolutely not the kind of thing that victors go around saying in the arena. Despite my best efforts, I can feel tears starting to pool in my eyes. And that's when Peeta's like, oh, are you okay? Are you in pain? Because this is after she got hurt. And that's when she's like, I can't say the real reason. But she says, I give him another reason, because it's equally true, but can be taken as a brief moment of weakness instead of a terminal one. I want to go home, Peeta, I say plaintively, like a small child. We're going to flip from that now, kind of speedrunning the beginning of this, adding on to Katniss knowing her strength part in this series. She is not really afraid of the careers anymore at this point. I mean, she is, but she's also more confident in herself and thinks like, oh, let them come at me. I have my bow and arrows. I can kill you. And she says in this set of chapters, let them come with their night vision glasses and their heavy branch-breaking bodies right into the range of one of my arrows. Because remember, they couldn't climb the tree to get to her because they were so much bigger than her. And she can use her size to her advantage, and then she's also deadly with the bow and arrow, and she knows it. Speaking of her survival skills and her hunting skills, she's able to track down Peeta in the arena. She has no information on where he is, but she's smart and she knows Peeta has to have some source of water. So I'm going to start at the stream, and she does eventually find him. And this is a small moment, but because the game makers are making it so hot during the day, the rocks at the stream are getting hot. And instead of lighting a fire, she gets these hot stones and puts them in the stew to heat up Peeta's stew that she's making, so she doesn't have to risk lighting a fire. Like, would you have thought of that? Like, would you have thought to do that? I mean, I can't say I've ever been in this situation, but that just seems like I don't think I would have thought of that. And then everything at the feast, yes, she does get hurt, but she's still able to shoot when Clove is literally throwing knives at her. And this is also a moment of her knowing her strength, because she says, I keep moving, positioning the next arrow automatically, as only someone who has hunted for years can do. So she's giving herself credit here. She's getting more confident. I mean, she's getting more, you know, trauma, but she is getting more confident. On to Katniss and her owing people. She does not like to feel that she owes people. Thresh is kind of on the same wavelength as her. I mean, she thought about this. Why did the people from District 11 send me the bread? Is it just a thank you? Or is it that they don't like owing people like I do, and this is their way of repaying me? Or is it a combination of both? And Thresh has that same mindset as her, is I don't want to owe you. And that's why he lets her go. Peeta does not think that Katniss owes him anything, but Katniss does. I mean, she even thought about, when they were reaped, how am I going to repay him now that we're going into this arena? I'm never going to get the chance to repay him. But Peeta has never thought of it that way. There's also a little bit of Katniss's preconceived notions about how the merchant families live, and that she kind of assumes that they don't ever want for anything, because they are better off than people in the scene. That's no question. But they're not rolling in money either. So this is the conversation between Katniss and Peeta, when Peeta's like, he lets you go because you owe him for Rue. And Katniss says, I don't expect you to understand it. You've always had enough. But if you lived in the seam, I wouldn't have to explain, I say. And Peeta says, and don't try. Obviously, I'm too dim to get it. And that's when she says, it's like the bread. How I never seem to get over owing you for that. And Peeta goes, the bread? What, from when we were kids? He says. I think we can let that go. I mean, you just brought me back from the dead. And Katniss still is like, no, I still owe you. She says, but you didn't know me. We had never spoken. Besides, it's the first gift that's always the hardest to pay back. I wouldn't even have been here to do it if you hadn't helped me then. So she's still like, no, I still owe you. Which I think maybe a part of that is that was an enormous act of kindness on Peeta's part, and she's not really used to people being that kind to her. And so it's, that moment has just really, really stuck with her. And yes, she still feels like she owes him, but I wonder if a part of that is just still being in awe kind of him being that kind. I am covering a lot of Katniss and Peeta's relationship in this set of chapters, but we do get some instances that are foreshadowing for the rebellion and Katniss's role in it later on. And I want to parallel with something she says here with what she says in Catching Fire. It's like this is the start of her willing to use her death as a defiance, and willing to go down, not just going down fighting, but willing to go down defying. When Clove is holding Katniss down and taunting her about Rue, I won't close my eyes. The comment about Rue has filled me with fury. Enough fury, I think, to die with some dignity. As my last act of defiance, I will stare her down as long as I can see, which will probably not be an extended period of time, but I will stare her down. I will not cry out. I will die, in my own small way, undefeated. That's what she thinks is going to be her last act of defiance to Clove and to the careers for killing Rue. In Catching Fire, the stakes are higher, and she has kind of the same thought. But instead of having one last act of defiance to her fellow tributes, she's having one last act of defiance to the president and to help fuel the rebellion. She says, yes, everyone in the districts will be watching me to see how I handle this death sentence, this final act of President Snow's dominance. They will be looking for some sign that their battles have not been in vain. If I can make it clear that I'm still defying the Capitol right up to the end, the Capitol will have killed me, but not my spirit. What better way to give hope to the rebels? The beauty of this idea is that my decision to keep Peeta alive at the expense of my own life in itself is an act of defiance, a refusal to play the Hunger Games by the Capitol's rules. My private agenda dovetails completely with my public one. I'm going to start calling these, I think, sparks of the rebellion, because they're things that lead up to the uprisings and the revolution. And they can be small but pivotal moments. And it's the way that Katniss thinks about certain things too. She recognizes breaking the Capitol's rules, which that is in of itself an act of rebellion. When Thresh spares Katniss to repay his debt for Rue, she says, I understand that if Thresh wins, he'll have to go back and face a district that has already broken all the rules to thank me, and he is breaking the rules to thank me too. Thresh and District 11 have both broken rules for Katniss, which, like I said, is in of itself an act of rebellion. They are not exactly working with another district, but they are not treating another district tribute as the enemy. Back to adding on to previous segments, Katniss and her coal comparisons. When Peeta is running a fever, she thinks he is hot as a coal stove. And adding on to her describing herself as a type of creature, which she does throughout the original trilogy. I think I started this list back in episode 2. When she's bleeding from her forehead and running back to the cave, she says, I crash into the trees, repeatedly swiping away the blood that's pouring into my eye, fleeing like the wild, wounded creature I am. Onto something a little more funny. Katniss and her being quote-unquote pure when it comes to naked bodies. PETA making fun of her with this. And it's not just PETA that teases her about it, it's the other victors who they will tease her about her, you know, quote-unquote purity, and Katniss gets offended by it and catching fire. This is a very, like, non-issue, I think, but you do see some development when she's taking the first arena, like, I don't know why this is so funny to me, but she's like, shit, I'm gonna have to strip down PETA to help him. And in the Quarter Quell, when they have to strip down Beetee to help with his wounds, she's like, yeah, whatever. When she's trying to help PETA at the stream, he has all this stuff all over him because he, like, camouflaged himself in. And he's obviously filthy from being in the arena. She says, I can't even see his clothes, if he's wearing clothes. The thought makes me hesitate a moment, but then I plunge in. Naked bodies are no big deal in the arena, right? But in the next game, she isn't as uncomfortable with it when they have to strip Beetee down. This is also like a compare and contrast with Prim and Katniss, because Prim, she's a healer, and so it doesn't really affect her, and I'll talk about that in a second to compare the two. But this is what Katniss is thinking. I've left on PETA's undershorts because there's no... this is so... I've left on PETA's undershorts because they're not in bad shape, and I don't want to pull them over his swollen thigh. And alright, maybe the idea of him being naked makes me uncomfortable. That's another thing about my mother and Prim. Nakedness has no effect on them, gives them no cause for embarrassment. Because her mother and Prim can easily treat wounds, and it doesn't affect them, and seeing people naked is no big deal because they're doctors, they're healers. But they can't go hunting, and Katniss can, and Katniss can't deal with, you know, sickness and wounds and things that come along with being a healer. And like I mentioned before, she will clear out of the house. If her mom and Prim are treating like a bad mining accident victim, she gets out of there because she doesn't want to see it. She doesn't even like being around coughing, so she can't really even handle being around sickness. And no hate to Katniss, this is very disgusting. When she's draining the pus from PETA's leg, she has to try not to vomit. And this is also an instance of her biting her cheek. If you know from a previous episode, I was talking about how she bites her lip and bites her cheek and bites her nails a lot. She says, I tell myself this is a good thing and bite the inside of my cheek hard because my breakfast is threatening to make an appearance. And she's just very awkward about, like, how do I deal with his leg? PETA's almost passed out at this point because she's rolled him and he was in a lot of pain with that. She's trying to, like, help him down the stream and he almost passes out. So she sits him down, puts his head between his legs, and she's like, I pat his back awkwardly as I survey the area. A little line, but she's like, I don't know what to do. So like I said, I'm going to compare and contrast Katniss and Prim. Katniss can hunt and strip a kill, and Prim can't do that. She doesn't have the stomach to do that. Prim can help wounded and sick people, but Katniss doesn't have the stomach for that. They are complete opposites in that way of each other. They are a hunter and a healer. They both have strengths and weaknesses. And like she said, while naked bodies make Katniss very uncomfortable, they don't bother Prim and her mother in the least. She says, ironically, at this point in the games, my little sister would be far more used to PETA than I am. And still, speaking of Prim, Katniss, again, doesn't want to make Prim watch her suffer. She's done this throughout the game. She's thinking about, what do I look like? I don't want Prim to watch me suffer. When she's at the feast and Clove pins her down, she's like, this is it. She's going to kill me. She knows that Clove is going to torture her. And she isn't even really thinking about herself at that point. She's thinking about Prim. She says, this is it, I think, and I hope for Prim's sake it will be fast. You could even draw like a parallel between that line and Prim's death in Mockingjay. You could put that line in Mockingjay. She's saying, I hope for Prim's sake my death will be fast. But in Mockingjay, I would hope, I'm sure Katniss hopes too, that for Prim's sake, I hope Prim's death was fast, that the bomb went off so quickly that she didn't feel it. Last set of chapters, Katniss said that Rue only had her. And in this set of chapters, when she's trying to help PETA's leg and she's like, I wish I could run off into the woods and have my mom and Prim peel this, she thinks this time that there's no one here for PETA but me. Now on to more Katniss and PETA stuff. Katniss caring about PETA, developing feelings for him, or maybe not acknowledging that there are feelings for him, but they're there. When she realizes, oh, PETA was playing the star-crossed lover angle this whole time, he wasn't actually a danger to me, she says, PETA, it turns out, has never been a danger to me. The thought makes me smile. I drop my hands and hold my face up to the moonlight so the cameras can be sure to catch it. See, she wasn't smiling for the cameras. She was smiling and then dropped her hands and was like, let me let the cameras catch this. And she wants to immediately start looking for PETA, of course, but she has to make herself, no, you have to sleep first, and then the next morning you can go look for him. When she's trying to figure out where he would go, she thinks, he's very hard to predict, which might be interesting under different circumstances, but at the moment only provides an extra obstacle. And she is scared throughout this set of chapters that he is going to die. Even before she sees he has blood poisoning, she is scared that he's going to die. And I want to point this out too, but I knew he was injured and I still came after him. I'm just going to have to trust that whatever instinct sent me to find him was a good one. So she doesn't even think about it. She is instinctively going to find and help Peeta because she does care about him. And this is the start of Peeta giving Katniss some comfort. I mean, he'll obviously do this in Catching Fire with their, mutual trauma. But even here in the arena, he is helping comfort her. He doesn't even necessarily know he's doing that. He's just being Peeta, and Katniss is just so not used to this kind of comfort. I know there's a lot of quotes, okay? I can't say any better though than what's in the book. Here's the first moment I want to point out. His hand brushes the loose strands of hair off my forehead. Unlike the staged kisses and caresses so far, this gesture seems natural and comforting. I don't want him to stop, and he doesn't. He's still stroking my hair when I fall asleep. I mean, they weren't staged to begin with on Peeta's side, but... And then also in the cave, as we settle in, he pulls my head down to use his arm as a pillow. The other rests protectively over me even when he goes to sleep. No one has held me like this in such a long time. Since my father died and I stopped trusting my mother, no one else's arms have made me feel this safe. Suck it, Gale. When she's coming back into consciousness, she gets scared because she thought she was at home, and then she's confused on where am I? Whose voice is that? But then once she realizes that it's Peeta, she immediately feels better. When she hears the trumpet sound, she calls Claudius Templesmith her best friend because he's the one that announced that both her and Peeta can live. And as she's putting on a quote-unquote act for the cameras and trying to we have to play this up if we want Haymitch to send us sponsors, when her and Peeta are going back and forth, she says, I fumble. I'm not as smooth with words as Peeta. And while I was talking, the idea of actually losing Peeta hit me again, and I realized how much I don't want him to die. And it's not about the sponsors, and it's not about what will happen back home, and it's not just that I don't want to be alone. It's him. I don't want to lose the boy with the bread. And she does start to acknowledge her feelings towards him, but she doesn't want to admit that in front of the whole country. If it was just her and him having this conversation with no cameras, it probably would have been different. But she doesn't want to have to admit her feelings in front of the whole country, which is very understandable. So she shuts down. She says, I wish I could pull the shutters closed, blocking out this moment from the prying eyes of Panem, even if it means losing food. Whatever I'm feeling, it's no one's business but mine. This is also the set of chapters that they have, obviously, their first kiss, and the first kiss that Katniss kind of considers their first real kiss. And she only thinks about this and only thinks about kissing this way when she's talking about Peeta. So if you think Katniss was in love with Gale, go argue with the wall. I'm going to talk about more of this in Catching Fire, how she describes the two of them. And this moment, the moment I'm talking about, she says, this is the first kiss that we're both fully aware of. Neither of us hobbled by sickness or pain or simply unconscious. Our lips neither burning with fever or icy cold. This is the first kiss where I actually feel stirring inside my chest, warm and curious. This is the first kiss that makes me want another. In Catching Fire, when they're on the beach, she thinks back to this moment in the cave. I feel that thing again, the thing I only felt once before, in the cave last year when I was trying to get Haymitch to send us some food. I kissed Peeta about 1,000 times during those games and after, but there was only one kiss that made me feel something stir deep inside. Only one that made me want more. But my head wound started bleeding and he made me lie down. This is so much different than what I normally talk about on the series. But switching gears from Katniss for a second and going on to Peeta, Peeta still does not fully believe that he can survive these games, even with as far as he's made it in the games. The fact that he's still holding on, dying by the riverbank without Haymitch sending him any sponsors. Even with Katniss showing up and helping him, he is still thinking he's going to die. And speaking of sponsors, this is when he finds out that Haymitch has been sending Katniss sponsors, but has not sent him anything. Peeta's definitely hurt by it. He does want to save Katniss. I mean, he even says himself that he would have chosen to send her stuff over him, but just like his mother, Haymitch chose Katniss over him. He's never the person that people are believing in. He's never the person that people think is going to survive. Katniss, Peeta, and Haymitch all actually discuss that in Catching Fire when they're in District 11. He says, well, I never had that opportunity because he never sent me anything until you showed up, says Peeta. And then Katniss thinks, I haven't thought much about this, how it must have looked from Peeta's perspective. When I appeared in the arena having received burn medicine and bread, when he, who was at death's door, had gotten nothing. Like Haymitch was keeping me alive at his expense. Look, boy, Haymitch begins. That's when Peeta cut said, don't bother, Haymitch. I know you had to choose one of us, and I'd have wanted it to be her. His defense mechanism, like I've mentioned before, is humor. He hides his fear and his hurt behind his humor and then him needling Katniss, because at this point he doesn't think he's going to survive even with the rule change. An example of this is when Katniss is telling Peeta about her getting Lady. Peeta says, when Katniss is describing her mother and Prim healing Lady, Peeta says that they sound like her because, Katniss has been healing him. And she says, oh no, Peeta, they work magic. That thing couldn't have died if it tried. I say, but then I bite my tongue, realizing what it must sound like to Peeta, who is dying in my incompetent hands. Don't worry, I'm not trying, he jokes. Finish the story. Okay, I love Peeta, if you couldn't tell. Him taking care of Katniss after she took care of him, he's so sweet. He is the reason I have such high expectations for men, okay? I have had Peeta Mellark as an example since I was 13, so what, 12 years? I don't know math. He was taking care of Katniss after she got hurt at the feast. He tells her, you know, you let me take care of you for a while. And because, you know, Katniss is stubborn, she's been taking care of him, and he gets her to let him take care of her. And he tried the best that he could to keep the rain from coming into the cave and landing on Katniss. He also doesn't have his jacket on either, and it's freezing outside because Katniss had taken it off of him before she went to the feast because he was in the sleeping bag and he was, you know, burning up with fever, so he didn't need it, and she was going to. And after she had woken up, Peeta used his jacket to wrap Katniss's feet because she had ran through the water with her shoes on, and so her feet were freezing. And so he used his jacket to help warm up her feet. And it's not until Katniss makes him put his jacket back on that he does. My socks are dry enough to wear now. I make Peeta put his jacket back on. The damp cold seems to cut right through my bones, so he must be half frozen. Onto some Peeta foreshadowing. Katniss says maybe he held out better against the Tracker Jacker poison than Cato. I mean, the fact that he was able to come back to himself as much as he could fighting through that Tracker Jacker venom in Mockingjay. Yeah, I think he did. This is not like actually word for word in the books, but like headcanon, I think we all know that Peeta would have fought for as long as he possibly could against the Tracker Jacker venom. He would have held out for as long as he could when he was being tortured in the Capitol. He was still himself enough. He was able to fight through it enough to get that last warning out to Katniss that 13 was going to be bombed. Also in Mockingjay, there was a direct callback to the blood poisoning scene in the cave in this book. Peeta says, I know what blood poisoning is, Katniss, even if my mother isn't a healer. When they're in Tigress's basement in Mockingjay hiding out, Katniss is cleaning Peeta's handcuff wounds, and Peeta says, I know what blood poisoning is, Katniss, even if my mother isn't a healer. And Katniss thinks, I'm jolted back in time to another wound, another set of bandages. You said that same thing to me in the first Hunger Games. Real or not real? Real, he says, and you risked your life getting the medicine that saved me. Real, I shrug. You were the reason I was alive to do it. And that's also a direct callback to Katniss saying the same thing to Peeta during the cave, that he's the reason that she's here to do it at all. And when Katniss knocks Peeta out with the sleep syrup, she says, it's strange to be so physically close to someone who's so distant. Peeta might as well be back in the Capitol, or in District 12, or on the moon right now. He'd be no harder to reach. After his rescue in Mockingjay, Peeta is there physically, but mentally he is, again, very hard to reach. On a more funny, happy note, more on Peeta's personality and his humor, there's gonna be a lot of quotes, okay? So sue me, but actually don't sue me. Him saying when Katniss is looking for him, he's camouflaged in the ground. She can't see him. And his first words to her are, "You here to finish me off, sweetheart?" Kind of mocking her because that's what Haymitch calls her. She's like looking for him like, Peeta, where are you? He doesn't say, look down. He goes, well, don't step on me. This moment, Peeta smiles. Yes, frosting, the final defense of the dying. He's literally joking about himself dying, which is kind of a coping mechanism. And then also just because he's Peeta, he knows how out of depth she is with trying to heal, and he's trying to like help her along. I mean, he's the one sitting here dying, and he sees how much she's like, shit, what do I do? She even says, he looks almost sorry for me, as if he knows how lost I am. He calls her Dr. Everdeen at one point too when she's treating him, and he likes, like I said earlier, needling Katniss. He likes messing with her. Besides, I like watching you sleep. You don't scowl. Improves your looks a lot. This, of course, brings on a scowl that makes him grin. Just a little moment of Peeta being kind of funny and like really showing that he is a baker. When they're planning on hunting and gathering the next day after Katniss wakes up, Peeta says, I wish there was some sort of bread bush out there. I'm going to quote a whole bunch here because they left out a lot of this in the movies. Their relationship and their dynamic, it's just, I love it so much, and I wish they would have kept more of it in the movie. He kind of scares her, one, with the camouflage, because he's not, like, exactly letting her know where he is. I gasp, and I'm rewarded with a hint of white teeth as he laughs. Peeta is in pain and, you know, slowly dying, but he, like I said, he still messes with Katniss, and he laughs at her when he startles her. Remember, we're madly in love, so it's alright to kiss me anytime you feel like it. I jerk my head back but end up laughing. Thanks, I'll keep that in mind. At least he's still able to joke around. This, I'm gonna quote a whole bunch here. I'm gonna read the whole fucking scene because they should have kept this in the movie, and I will die on this hill because I love it and I hate that they cut it. So buckle up, I'm gonna read this whole thing. Katniss, Peeta says. I meet his eyes, knowing my face must be some shade of green. He mouths the words, how about that kiss? I burst. This scene makes me laugh too. I burst out laughing because the whole thing is so revolting I can't stand it. Something wrong? He asks a little too innocently. I'm no good at this. I'm not my mother. I have no idea what I'm doing, and I hate pus, I say. Ugh. I allow myself to let out a groan as I rinse away the first run of leaves and apply the second. Ugh, how do you hunt? He asks. Trust me, killing things is much easier than this, I say. Although for all I know, I am killing you. Can you speed it up a little? He asks. No, shut up and eat your pears. Back to Katniss and her, quote unquote, being pure when it comes to seeing people naked. And Peeta just does not give a fuck. You remember how I said he does not get embarrassed easily? This is like the prime example of that. She goes, here, cover yourself with this and I'll wash your shorts. Oh, I don't care if you see me, says Peeta. You're just like the rest of my family, I say. I care, all right? I turn my back and look at the stream until the undershorts splash into the current. He must be feeling a bit better if he could throw. You're kind of squeamish for such a lethal person, says Peeta, as I beat the shorts clean between the two rocks. I wish I'd let you give Haymitch a shower after all. Peeta just does not give a fuck. I mean, he's dying, and the girl he's had a crush on, was the one helping him. So he really doesn't give a fuck. Also, I saw this debate a little while ago online. Do you guys think they censored that kind of stuff in the arena or just showed everything? But moving away from the funny scenes, Katniss and Peeta are both stubborn when it comes to protecting the other one. Katniss angrily insists that she's going to go get his medicine and he can't stop her. And that's when Peeta threatens, fine, I'll drag myself after you if you do, and start yelling. That way another tribute finds me. And Katniss knows he's not bluffing. She says, he's just stubborn enough and maybe just strong enough to do it. Come howling after me in the woods. And then, what am I supposed to do? Sit here and watch you die? I say. He must know that's not an option. That the audience would hate me. And frankly, I would hate myself too if I didn't even try. I won't die, I promise, if you promise not to go. Peeta tells her that he's going if she's going, just like in the Court of Quell. If Katniss has to go back in, Peeta's going to volunteer to go back in. Peeta also knows that Katniss isn't 100% comfortable talking about feelings. Even though there's the Katniss is somewhat acting and somewhat being genuine and not wanting to say her real feelings, Peeta knows that Katniss isn't comfortable talking about her feelings, even though he thinks this whole thing has been genuine. And it's because of moments when Katniss is kind of interweaving stuff that's real and what's not real, pun intended, that Peeta thinks that she's being genuine 100% of the time. He doesn't know that she's acting, but there is some truth to what Katniss says and to her actions. Jumping into that, Katniss thinking that Peeta is acting and Peeta thinking that she isn't. There's a lot to unpack during their first kiss. Impulsively, I lean forward and kiss him, stopping his words. This is probably overdue anyway, since he's right. We are supposed to be madly in love. It's the first time I've ever kissed a boy, which should make some sort of impression, I guess, but all I can register is how unnaturally hot his lips are from fever. I break away and pull the edge of the sleeping bag up around him. You're not going to die. I forbid it, all right? Katniss leaned forward to kiss him before thinking of the cameras. He kept trying to say, if I don't make it back, and Katniss kept cutting him off, and when he tried it again, that's when she leaned forward and kissed him to stop him. She says it herself that she impulsively kissed him. It's not until the next sentence that she says, well, this is probably overdue anyway because we're supposed to be madly in love. So she's subconsciously justifying to herself why she kissed Peeta. Does she play up for the cameras? Yes, absolutely. But is all of it pretend? No. And she herself doesn't even 100% know what is real and what's not real, what's her and what's her playing up for the cameras at points. She's also worried about him dying at this point, and there's also a little bit of that utilitarian way of thinking when she does kiss him, because he is very feverish at this point, and she notices that about kissing him. She even says herself, there are girls in the seam, some of the merchant girls too, who navigate these waters so easily, but I've never had much time or use for it. Right there, she's like, if it doesn't have use for survival, I'm not focusing on it. And later on, like I said earlier, when they're both fully conscious and they do kiss, that's when she starts changing the way she's thinking about kissing Peeta. Their first kiss from Peeta's perspective is he is feverish and dying, and from his perspective, he doesn't know that Katniss is, quote unquote, acting for the cameras. They're also not able to go at a slower pace because of their star-crossed lovers angle and because they could die at any moment. I mean, from Peeta's perspective, he's had a crush on Katniss since he was 5, so he's had time with this, but Katniss didn't know anything about his feelings until the interviews, and she still thinks that he's making it up. So she doesn't have time to detangle in her mind what's her and what's her exaggerating for the cameras. She also doesn't have any previous feelings like this or relationships to pull from or get guidance from, which she kind of struggles with, how do I portray that I'm in love with Peeta? She says, Haymitch couldn't be sending a clearer message. 1 kiss equals 1 pot of broth. I can almost hear a snarl. You're supposed to be in love, sweetheart. The boy's dying. Give me something I can work with. And he's right. If I want to keep Peeta alive, I'm going to have to give the audience something more to care about. Star-crossed lovers desperate to get home together. 2 hearts beating as one. Romance. Never having been in love, this is going to be a real trick. I feel bad for both of them because it's not fair to either one of them. I'll talk about this more next episode when they realize finally that they're on completely different pages on what was going on in the arena. But neither one of them are intentionally trying to play the other one or intentionally trying to hurt the other one. It isn't until Peeta tells Katniss about when his crush started that she starts to question, oh, maybe he's not making this up. Up until then, she's still thinking, oh, he's so good at this. He's such a great actor. Peeta says before she goes to get his medicine that just her being there is an enormous improvement over being camouflaged in the mud. And she says, oh, right, the whole romance thing. I reach out to touch his cheek and he catches my hand and presses it against his lips. I remember my father doing this very thing to my mother, and I wonder where Peeta picked it up. Surely not from his father and the witch. And then, of course, when the rule changed, she's like, oh, Peeta must have been playing the star-crossed lovers angle this whole time, but it was based on his real feelings. Peeta has a moment of realizing that Katniss still doesn't 100% believe that he really has feelings for her. I think it's less of him, oh, she thinks I'm acting, and more of him thinking she thinks I couldn't have feelings for her. You know what I'm saying? When she asks him why he threw her the bread, he says, why? You know why, Peeta says. I give my head a slight painful shake. Haymitch said you would take a lot of convincing. Haymitch, I ask. What's he got to do with this? Nothing, Peeta says. Katniss still thinks that Peeta is making up the whole romance thing, and that's why she's confused. And Haymitch, rightfully, because he knows how Katniss thinks because they're so alike, knows she won't believe that Peeta is being genuine. And I want to point out that Peeta dodged the question there. He changed the topic. And when they're talking about after she wakes up, Katniss knocking Peeta out, she's kind of teasing him like, oh, I did do the right thing. I saved you. And she's trying to play it up for the cameras, what she thinks Peeta is doing. But then he goes, no, just don't, Katniss. His grip tightens, hurting my hand, and there's real anger in his voice. Don't die for me. You won't be doing me any favors, all right? I'm startled by his intensity, but recognize an excellent opportunity for getting food, so I try to keep up. So she thinks that, oh, he's just really good at this. I need to keep up. The moment that Katniss actually starts to think that, oh, maybe Peeta isn't making this up, is like I said, after he tells her about when his crush started. When they're talking about that, she says, for a moment, I'm almost foolishly happy, and then confusion sweeps over me, because we're supposed to be making up this stuff, playing at being in love, not actually being in love. But Peeta's story has a ring of truth to it, the part about my father and the birds. And I did sing the first day of school, although I don't remember the song. And that red plaid dress, there was one, a hand-me-down to prim that got washed to rags after my father's death. It would explain another thing too, why Peeta took a beating to give me the bread on that awful hollow day. So if those details are true, could it all be true? She is happy. She is, quote, foolishly happy before she's like, oh, wait, this is supposed to be an act. And then after that, because they're in the games, like I said before, it doesn't allow Katniss time to process her feelings. And it doesn't allow her the privacy of processing those feelings with Peeta without the whole country watching. Katniss doesn't like to be vulnerable, and this is very vulnerable. So she is saying stuff that she wouldn't necessarily say if they weren't on camera, but that doesn't mean it's not true. So later, when she thinks back on like what was real and what was not real, it kind of gets wires crossed because some of the stuff she says isn't necessarily a lie about her feelings. It's just she was not ready to admit that, and she didn't want to admit that in front of everybody. That part of her being that vulnerable wasn't genuine, but that doesn't mean her feelings aren't genuine. I don't know if I'm explaining that enough. It's very hot in here if you can't tell I'm sweating. What I'm talking about of her not being ready to admit it, but having to admit it kind of, is you have a remarkable memory, I say haltingly. I remember everything about you, says Peeta, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. You're the one who wasn't paying attention. I am now, I say. Well, I don't have much competition here, he says. I want to draw away, to close those shutters again. It's as if I hear Haymitch whispering in my ear, say it, say it. I swallow hard and get the words out. You don't have much competition anywhere, and this time it's me who leans in. It's that same language of her wanting to close the shutters. She doesn't want other people to see this. She doesn't want to admit this in front of everybody, but she has to because they're in the games. It's a little parallel between Katniss and Peeta and Burdock and Astrid. So when Katniss is trying to think like, okay, how do I act like I'm in love? I don't have experience with this. I've never been in love. My parents were in love. She says, I think I'm my parents. The way my father never failed to bring her gifts from the woods. The way my mother's face would light up at the sound of his boots at the door. The way she almost stopped living when he died. Peeta gives Katniss a gift of the pearl in the second arena. And he also picks her flowers, which turn out to be wild onions, on the train back to District 12 after the games, before have their, oh, we're on different pages. To put it lightly, Katniss was not in a very good mental state when Peeta was captured. Sadly, moving away from Everlark, Katniss singing in music assembly and the song she sings. Katniss actually mentions her music teacher in the last set of chapters when she's talking about the lullaby that she sings to Rue. And then, of course, music assembly class is where Peeta heard Katniss sing on the first day of school. Katniss had sung the Valley song on the first day of school. Lucy Gray sings the Valley song in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes when they're in the zoo. Katniss, Peeta, and Haymitch's relationship. In this book, Peeta tells Katniss when they're talking about Haymitch, I always knew you were his favorite, says Peeta. Please, he can't stand being in the same room as me, I say. Because you're just alike, mutters Peeta. And then the epilogue of Sunrise on the Reaping, which makes me cry. I was sobbing the first time I read that epilogue. But Haymitch says in the epilogue for Sunrise on the Reaping about Katniss, she's not an easy person. She's like me, Peeta always says. But she was smarter than me, or luckier. She's the one who finally kept that sun from rising. Oh, my heart. Oh. I don't know how I'm going to get through Sunrise on the Reaping. It's just going to be footage of me crying. See, I've had 12 years to deal with the trauma of the original trilogy. I've only had a year to cope with the trauma that Sunrise gave me. We also get more moments, this set of chapters, of Katniss interpreting what Haymitch is trying to say to her with the gifts he sends. So 1 kiss equals 1 pot of broth. And then later on, she says that physical affection must not be what Haymitch is looking for. Katniss says, my instincts tell me Haymitch isn't just looking for physical affection. He wants something more personal. The sort of stuff he was trying to get me to tell about myself when we were practicing for the interview. But in my head, I can hear Haymitch's smug, if slightly exasperated words. Yes, that's what I'm looking for, sweetheart. This happens at the end of this set of chapters, so I'm saving talking about Sunrise on the Reaping and the feast for next episode. Now on to Gale. I don't think Gale is the worst person ever, the worst person alive. I more just don't like his attitude towards Katniss and his toxic behavior. I think he does genuinely care about Prim, and which just adds to the fact that he, not purposely, but he helped create the bomb that ends Prim's life. I bring that up because when Katniss is telling the story about how she got Lady, she says, Gale offered to carry her. I think he wanted to see the look on Prim's face as much as I did. And remember, Gale has 3 younger siblings and he has a baby sister. So I'm sure Gale sees Prim kind of as a sister. As for more of his relationship with Katniss, they are best friends and Katniss knows him. So I want to read this right here because I think it says something about Gale's character already. She's thinking about her family back home. She says, and Gale, I know him. He won't be shouting and cheering, but he'll be watching every moment, every twist and turn, and willing me to come home. I wonder if he's hoping that Peeta makes it as well. Gale's not my boyfriend, but would he be if I opened that door? He talked about us running away together. Was that just a practical calculation of our chances of survival away from the district, or something more? I wonder what he makes of all this kissing. Katniss wonders if Gale hopes that Peeta will make it back as well. Right there is just kind of an inkling of who Gale is, I think. Katniss, who is his best friend and knows him very well, is wondering, he is hoping that a boy from their district who is suffering in the Hunger Games because of the Capitol that he hates so much, she is wondering, I wonder if he hopes Peeta will make it back as well. Katniss, at some level, has some kind of inkling that Gale is selfish when it comes to her. Like, why wouldn't Gale, if he wasn't being selfish, not want a boy from his district to make it home from the Hunger Games if Katniss can also make it home from the Hunger Games? It's not like it's, at this point, one or the other. Right now, they can both make it home. So why would he not want that? He may not want them to be together. That would be fine. But not wanting him to survive at all, that's selfish. Katniss also wonders here if she wanted to, would Gale be her boyfriend? So there is a possibility that maybe she does have feelings for him. I think it's more she just doesn't have experience with this kind of stuff and he is her best friend. And I say I don't think she really has romantic feelings towards Gale because of the way that she describes Peeta and kissing Peeta versus how she describes kissing Gale. But I will get into more of that in Catching Fire. I'm not saying that, oh, Katniss doesn't have any feelings for Gale because I don't like Gale and I think he's toxic. She doesn't talk about him the same way she talks about Peeta from the first book. But she does care about him. There's no doubt about that. He is her best friend. You know, when she's heading to the feast, she wishes that Gale was there to have her back because she's going in alone. She also draws a comparison between Peeta and Gale, which leads into Katniss's misconceptions about merchants, but give me 1 second for that. When they're talking about where Thresh is hiding out and Peeta's like, none of us wanted to go in there because there could be snakes, there could be hidden dangers. She thinks, I don't say so, but Peeta's words remind me of the warnings they give us about not going beyond the fence in District 12. I can't help for a moment comparing him and Gale, who would see that field as a potential source of food as well as a threat. Thresh certainly did. It's not that Peeta's soft exactly. He's proved that he's not a coward. But there are things you don't question too much, I guess, when your home always smells like baking bread, whereas Gale questions everything. Moving into Katniss's misconceptions about merchants, I'm going to start discussing that here. Because while they are better off than the scene, they're not exactly thriving. Katniss assumes that they always have enough to eat, they have fresh food. And she learns from Peeta that That's not always true. She also thinks, what would Peeta think of the irreverent banter that passes between us as we break the law each day? Would it shock him? The things we say about Panem? Gale's tirades against the Capitol? This is before she knows about Peeta's family eating mostly stale food, stale bread. So she still has these preconceived notions about merchants. I don't think it would shock Peeta to learn about what her and Gale say in the woods about the Capitol. In Catching Fire, while they're in the Capitol during the victory tour, Peeta's the one that says, it's just sometimes I can't stand it anymore, to the point where I'm not sure what I'll do. He pauses, then whispers, maybe we're wrong, Katniss. About what, I ask. About trying to subdue things in the districts, he says. My head turns swiftly from side to side, but no one seems to have heard. Sorry, he says. He should be. This is no place to be voicing such thoughts. Save it for home, I tell him. This is after they've won and everything, but I don't think Peeta would be really shocked about their rantings of the Capitol in the woods. I'm not sure where I'm going with this crack theory that an orange backpack is a metaphor for Peeta, but I'm going to keep pointing it out, okay? Because the backpack that's marked with the number 12 at the feast that holds Peeta's medicine in it is orange, just like the orange backpack that Katniss grabbed at the start of the games. So there was my unhinged theory for the episode. I'm interweaving sad and funny moments in this episode. There's a callback in Mockingjay, kind of, to when Katniss is describing Prim and Lady. Katniss says that only I remember that night, Prim insisted on sleeping with Lady on a blanket next to the fire. And just before they drifted off, the goat licked her cheek, like it was giving her a goodnight kiss or something, I say. It was already mad about her. And then Peeta asks if Lady was still wearing the ribbon that they had put on her, because he's trying to picture it in his mind's eye. Well, in Mockingjay, when they're making the memory book, Katniss writes about Lady licking Prim's cheek. And Peeta's the one that draws the pictures of the person if they don't have a photo. She says, then in my most careful handwriting come all the details it would be a crime to forget. Lady licking Prim's cheek is the first thing that she mentions. One of the last things I want to talk about right now is the careers. So I've seen discourse of this online over the years, and I want to talk about it because are the careers victims of the Capitol? Yes. Are they children? Yes. Have they been brainwashed into this way of thinking? Yes. But to act like there is no accountability whatsoever, I think is wrong. There is a difference between having to kill to survive and having to kill because you're in the Hunger Games and slowly torturing someone to death and taking joy in it. I mean, you can make the argument that, oh, well, they're just doing it because they're putting on a show for the Capitol. But genuinely taking joy in torturing other children is a different ballpark. Is the real enemy the Capitol? Is the real enemy Snow? Yes. To use a real world example, let's say that a teenager has come from a really bad home life and their parents do awful things. And that teenager that's raised in this really bad household, that's been brainwashed kind of to thinking this stuff is normal, tortures another teenager to death. Would you say then that a 17 or 18-year-old can't be held accountable for torturing this other teenager, this other child to death, another 12-year-old to death because of how they were raised? Does that mean I think they're not victims of the Capitol? No, they are victims of the Capitol. But saying that they have no accountability whatsoever for their actions is not right. Clove was going to slowly torture Katniss to death. She was going to cut her up if Thresh hadn't shown up. And she was mocking the fact that, well, maybe she didn't do it, that they, the careers, killed Rue. Rue is a 12-year-old innocent child. And Cato wants to torture and kill Katniss slowly. At the end of the games, when Cato is, being slowly tortured and eaten alive by mutts, Katniss is able to eventually kill him out of mercy. I don't know if Cato would have done that if the roles were reversed. And this isn't a black and white topic. Just thinking about it, if this were like a real world perspective, take them out of the games, put them in the real world in a very bad situation where they're trained, where these, like I said, this teenager is taught to think this is okay. And they go and do something horrible. I can't say like specifics of some of the examples I'm thinking of, like even just true crime cases. And I don't have to censor myself either because these are real topics. A teenager that has been brainwashed into thinking it is okay to torture someone to death. It's okay to torture another child to death. You would understand why they're doing that. You would understand where they're coming from. You understand why they think like that, but that does not justify it. You would want this person who tortured a 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old, you would want them to have some kind of accountability. Well, wherever you think that is, that's a totally different topic. But you would not want them to be like, oh, they were raised that way. And yes, they're also kids. Do I think they are like fully able to grasp the consequences? No, they're teenagers. I just don't like it when people act as if Clove or Cato are equally the victim in this situation as Rue, let's say. Rue is not actively torturing people to death, and not even because she's 12 and they're like 18, but just the way they're treating Katniss. I mean, Katniss is 16 and they are okay and taking joy in killing another person slowly. Let's just say it like that. And again, I'm not saying that the careers are not victims. I'm not saying that at all. The capital is the real enemy here. The snow is the real enemy. To act like the careers are like this pillar of innocence is not right either. This is not a black and white situation. And we do get to see very briefly them, the careers, being children. And because we don't get to see specifically the careers' perspectives, but we do get a little moment of this. We get a moment of them being kids and caring about other people. Katniss sees as she's running away from the feast. Cato kneels beside Clove, spear in hand, begging her to stay with him. In a moment, he will realize it's futile. She can't be saved. So, and I don't want people to take it the wrong way either. But I'm not saying that the careers are not victims, but it's not right to say that they are completely innocent either. Let's just put it like that. I don't know how to end that topic, but that's just my 2 cents. Lastly, for this section, we have a catching fire parallel and then something that's a very small moment that gets called back to in the next set of chapters. For the catching fire spot, it's a very, very small thing, but there's a big thunderstorm and Katniss says, there's a clap of thunder and I see lightning electrify the sky through an opening in the rocks. And of course, in Catching Fire, she says, a dazzling bolt of electricity strikes a towering tree and then a lightning storm begins. I guess it's an indication of rain, of a water source for those who don't have mentors as smart as Haymitch. Which doesn't necessarily mean it's parallel, but I wanted to point it out because there's storms in both arenas. And then the small moment that gets called back to, Katniss says when they're in the cave, tomorrow when it's dry, I'll find us a place so high in the trees we can both sleep in peace, I promise, as I drift off. And in the next set of chapters, Peeta will ask Katniss, can we go back to the cave because he does not feel comfortable sleeping in a tree that high up off the ground. He doesn't think he can fall asleep like she can that high up in the tree. Now onto the timeline of the games. Continuing from last episode, we are on Thursday, July 20th, which is the 10th day in the arena. The rule change is announced that night and there are no fallen tributes. Friday, July 21st is arena day 11 and that's when Katniss finds Peeta. There are no fallen tributes that day either. Saturday, July 22nd is arena day 12. The feast is announced and again, there are no fallen tributes. Sunday, July 23rd is arena day 13. At dawn, the feast begins. Katniss is injured by Clove and Thresh kills Clove and lets Katniss go. Katniss makes it back to the cave, gives Peeta the medicine, and then passes out. There is one fallen tribute that night, which is Clove. Monday, July 24th is the 14th day in the arena. Katniss wakes up from being passed out and there are no fallen tributes. And then finally, part 1, because this day will continue in the next set of chapters. Tuesday, July 25th is arena day 15. The rainstorm continues and Peeta tells Katniss about when his crush started. As for their injuries in this set of chapters, Peeta's upper left leg was cut down to the bone by Cato's sword. And at the beginning of this set of chapters, it is a deep inflamed gash oozing both blood and pus, the swelling of the leg, and worst of all, the smell of festering flesh. Peeta is very weak from his injuries too. He is badly bruised with a long burn across his chest and 4 Tracker Jacker stings, if you count the one under his ear. And his flesh is very pale in the sunlight and he no longer looks strong and stocky. And like I've talked about, he was burning with fever. Aside from his leg, the rest of his lower body fared pretty well. He has 1 Tracker Jacker sting there and a few small burns as of chapter 19. In chapter 20, that's when the blood poisoning in his leg becomes evident. But his minor wounds like the burns and the Tracker Jacker stings have shown improvement. There was no more pus on it, but the swelling in his leg had increased and the tight, shiny skin is inflamed. And of course, that's when she sees the blood poisoning signs, that there are red streaks starting to crawl up his leg. Peeta is so delirious from his fever at one point, Katniss says that he's like listening to Haymitch before the alcohol has soaked him into incoherence. By chapter 22, Peeta is a lot better from the medication from his shot. He said that by that morning that almost all of the swelling in his leg was gone. As for Katniss's injury, she is of course injured at the feast, and the knife that Clove throws, it slices above her right eyebrow and opens a gash, and it bleeds so much that it pours down her face. And she was trying to staunch the flow of it as she was running back to the cave, and it was just soaking through the socks. And before she's yanked off by Thresh, Clove makes a small cut above her lip. For supplies, Katniss is down to 7 arrows at the end of this set of chapters, and inside that tiny orange backpack that Katniss got at the feast was just 1 hypodermic needle that of course she used for Peeta. Now on to symbolism. Frogs represent transformation, healing, renewal, personal growth, and change. Pears, shut up and eat your pears, represent longevity, affection, and comfort. Broth represents nourishment, basic sustenance, and humility. Chives represent protection, healing, and purification. A deer can represent gentleness, independence, freedom, guidance, transformation, vulnerability, and strength. A moth, specifically Katniss sees a green and silver moth before she passes out, can represent transformation. Rain can represent rebirth, cleansing, sadness, and introspection. Thunderstorms can represent strength, unpredictability, inner turmoil, grief, passion, and change. The color blue represents trust, calmness, tranquility, and peace. The color pink represents innocence, femininity, love, nurture, and compassion. And finally, red plaid can represent rebellion, strength, resilience, and connection to the land, which that is what Peeta describes Katniss's dress was on the first day of school. Just a couple quotes from this set of chapters that I haven't already mentioned in my jillion quotes from before. These are just moments that are either kind of funny or that they mean something in the rest of the series that I haven't mentioned, like I said. After Katniss knocks out Peeta, she says, "Even as he fades away, I can see in his eyes what I've done is unforgivable." And then talking about her still not being able to hear out of her ear, she says, "Never mind, if I get home, I'll be so stinking rich, I'll be able to pay someone to do my hearing." This one is from Thresh. He says, "You better run now, Fire Girl," when he's telling her to run from Cato. This one's just kind of humorous. Katniss says, "I'll be the first to admit we're not exactly riveting today. Starving, weak from injuries, trying not to reopen wounds. We're sitting huddled together, wrapped in the sleeping bag, yes, but mostly to keep warm. The most exciting thing either of us has done is nap." Now, lastly, the book to movie changes. If you couldn't tell already, the biggest thing is Peeta's humor and sass is just gone. The whole scene of Katniss finding Peeta is different. They didn't really show Peeta being himself as much in the first movie. And the banter between them, it's funny and I love it. The "you here to finish me off, sweetheart" line, and then Katniss telling him to shut up and eat your pears. They are all moments that should have been in the movie, and I will die on this hill, okay? That kind of stuff develops Katniss and Peeta's relationship in the books, and they should have kept it. It gives more depth to Peeta's character that we don't really get to see in the first movie. We do get to see more of it in Catching Fire, so thank you, Francis Lawrence, for that. We don't get as much of Katniss's humor in the movies either, because she can be funny, and especially when her and Peeta are going back and forth with each other. Peeta's camouflage. This has just become a meme at this point, the movie version. His camouflage in the book is nothing like it is in the movie. It's a lot more realistic in the book. I will show, if you're watching this, a picture of it in the Hunger Games Illustrated Edition. It doesn't look like it does in the movie, because even Josh Hutcherson was like, how did he do this in the arena? Because they have like professional makeup, but that's not what Peeta did in the arena when he was camouflaging himself. He used the mud and the leaves. The moments in the cave are shortened and they're changed. They can't keep everything, obviously, but there's just so much stuff that was changed for the cave and taken away. Haymitch sending Katniss sleep syrup to knock out Peeta doesn't happen in the movie. In the movie, Peeta just falls asleep and Katniss sneaks off. The bag, wait, I actually have it. I have the movie version, actually. If you're just listening, sorry, but the bags they use at the feast in the movie are not the same as the ones in the books. This is what they used in the movie, not the exact prop, but what it looks like. And the books are all different sizes and colors, but in the movie, they're all the same size silver bags with a district number on it. In the book, Thresh bashes Clove's head in with a rock. In the movie, he slams her up against the cornucopia. Like a lot of the wounds in the movies, it's much worse in the book. Katniss' wound from the knife is bleeding so much, like I said, that she ends up passing out after she gives Peeta the shot. In the movie, she is bleeding, yes, but it's not nearly as bad, and she just makes it back and Peeta wakes up because, remember, she didn't knock him out in the movie. Katniss getting upset when she's talking to Thresh at the feast and telling him about how her and Rue were allies is not in the movie. Peeta's blood poisoning is gone in the movie, and the medicine that Katniss gets from the feast is a hypodermic needle. It's a very deep cut, like it's down to his bone, and he has blood poisoning in the book. In the movie, it's just like a deep cut, and Katniss goes and gets some ointment from the feast that just, like her bird medicine, kind of magically heals it. It does not heal like that in the book. They spend a lot more time in the cave in the book than they do in the movie. And finally, the last thing I'm going to include, Haymitch doesn't send them a feast in the movie like he does in the book. And that is it for this week's episode of District Deep Dive. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm sorry it's out late. I have not been feeling very good and I just fell behind. Next episode, though, is going to be the last episode of this book. I'm going to be covering chapters 23 to 27. It's not the last episode, just the last one covering the first Hunger Games book. Before you go, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and maybe share this with some fellow Hunger Games fans, because like I've said, it really does help with the algorithm. You can also follow me and the show on social media, which I have all linked below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next week. Bye, guys.